Okay. Right, so we start? Yeah? Okay, so we'll start where we left it last week, yeah? And remember that we were developing the theoretical model for the market signaling, for market signaling, basically, yeah? And we basically starting to set up the model. So let's just recap a little bit on what the variables that we had for this model. Now, remember, like when we do behavioral economics, there's no general model that's like the religion of the models. Okay, that's it. So there are many exceptions to think. So there have to come a lot of your economic intuition, in which like what variables you take and how that variables will behave. So we are going to see some. So we will set up this model, and then we will see then like issues to asymmetric information, moral hazard. Then we will see also the problem of the principal agent problem. So we will see also variations to it. Okay. Okay, so remember that we had two workers, and we said, well, generalizing the problem, what we have to consider is the ability of the workers. And then when we consider the ability of the workers, that what we look at as the marginal product of labor of these workers. Yeah? So what we had is the marginal product of labor for high ability workers and the marginal product of labor for low ability workers. Now, if an employer is able to distinguish perfectly well between this ability, then we know he will be able, the employer will be able to equal the salary to the marginal product of exactly these workers, either high ability or low ability. It is fair to assume that the marginal product of a high ability worker will be higher than the marginal product of a low ability worker. Now, we said that if the employer cannot distinguish between the workers' types, so cannot distinguish between the marginal ability or the ability of the workers, then what we have is a pool equilibrium, and this is the last thing that we saw, right? So this equation that you have here in the slide is the pool equilibrium, yeah? So what we call a pool equilibrium in economics is, well, if you go to the goods and service markets, this is what you've seen all over in economics. You come into an intermediary price. When you go into the labor market, this will be an intermediary salary. Yeah? So assuming that you have H high ability workers and then 1 minus H low ability workers, then the pool wage, or the pool equilibrium in this case, it will be 1 minus H, which is the percentage of low ability workers that you have in this market, times the marginal product for low ability, plus the proportion of high ability workers that you have, which is H, times the marginal product of labor for high ability workers. And remember that the marginal product of labor equals the salary. Okay, so that will be the same that to put the wage of. Right, someone asked at the end of the lecture, are we assuming perfect competition on the firm side, right? Yes, we are. Okay, so this is a very common assumption when we are modeling. And it is a fair question to ask, because should we? Because we know that in reality it is no type of competition that we normally observe. But it is, modeling becomes really hard otherwise if we don't assume specific conditions on the firm side. But it is a really good thing for discussion on how it could change. Not that I'm going to ask you this in a discussion question, okay, but it is a very good topic for discussion on what could happen otherwise, but yeah. Okay, so now the question would be, right, if this is a pool equilibrium, right, this intermediary salary, what's going to happen? Well, if you are a low ability worker, remember, you will be relatively happy because, well, actually quite happy, because it is going to be higher than the salary that you will get if the employer is able to identify you as low ability. But if you're a high ability worker, it's going to be lower than the salary that otherwise you will get if the employer is able to identify you as high ability. So there is going to be an incentive for high ability workers to market, to signal themselves and say, no, actually I'm a high ability person, you know, and I want a higher salary. And how they are going to do this? Well, through education. Now, though in theory, market signaling is something that is really common to see within the education market, okay? And most of the modeling that you will see if you go to books is within the education market. In application, and we saw cases here, but you will also can see a lot of case study on this, could be some of the, when I ask you, can you think about examples of this? And you told me the insurance market, right? This, if you go to, for example, health insurance that some of you mentioned, this will be a very similar example, no? So if you are a relatively healthy person against a person that gets ill, well, there is a high incentive for healthy person to market themselves as healthy person, in this case, not to pay more, okay? To actually try to pay less. Right? So the idea then, in this case, would be how do you signal yourself, right, for that price? So the idea is exactly the same, okay? It's just the modeling would be different on that market, right? So that's what I mean, like there is not just one model that is valid for every single market. Though in theory, normally the modeling is done within the education market because that's the first model that appeared. Okay, so in this case, what you are going to use is years of education. So what we are going to look at is that optimal years of education. Okay, so as workers, we said, we saw it, remember that we saw this with numbers, okay? So if you remember the example with numbers, it is exactly the same, taking the numbers, but just modeling with equations. So, right, so if you think about education, education has a cost. And we said, well, think about the cost as a monetary and non-monetary cost, what we are going to call a specific and non-specific cost, right? Remember when we defined this. Now, within this specific and non-specific cost, for low ability workers, remember that we argue that these costs are going to be higher than for high ability workers. This, the actual cost of the fees will be exactly the same, right? It will be the actual non-specific cost. I thought you were coming here to lecture. At some point, okay. For the non-specific cost will be the ones, okay, that are going to be higher, yeah? So then what could be the decision so theoretically to go or not to go in education. Okay, so first of all, if you think within the model, think that if, so let me, what we're going to do, because to arrive to that two equations, which is the ones that we are going to arrive, okay, let me just follow up with exactly what the model is doing. Okay, so two things from here. So first, if, remember that in the slides previously, we've said, well, the salaries equal exactly the marginal productivity. Yeah? If the salaries are exactly equal to the marginal productivity, the difference between the wages has to be exactly the same that the difference between the marginal productivities of labor. Okay? So this means that if this is equal, then the difference between the wages will be exactly the same that the difference between the marginal productivities of labor. Yeah? That makes sense, okay? But just because you are going to see it, and then you are going to say, what is it doing, okay? But yeah. Okay, now, in terms of cost of education, remember that with numbers we saw, and this is going to be the same, well, it will make sense to, so let's see first low ability, which is actually the second condition, okay? So low ability, so from the high ability perspective, we don't want them to go to education, because otherwise, what's the point, okay? So they will decide not to go if it is too costly for them. Too costly in the sense that the increase in salary that they will have, okay, will not be big enough, okay, to cover all the costs. It will be too costly to go relatively to the increase in salary. Okay, so when then, okay, so this will be the second condition you will have, okay? When low ability, they will not decide to go to education. So when how much extra they get, so this difference between the salaries is less than their actual cost of education. EH is going to be common for the years in education, and the only reason to put the subscript H is because we are going to consider that are just the optimal years of education for high ability, okay? But it will be EH in general, optimal years of education. If you want to put E star instead of EH or EL, it's just optimum, okay? Then when high ability will go? Well, high ability will go if the gain in salary is higher than their cost in education, and their cost will be the cost per year, okay? So C is the cost per year, and then multiply by the number of years that they will go. But we are not exactly in that yet, but that relates to that, okay? Now, in the slide, what it's doing is to substitute this difference between the salaries for the difference between the marginal productivities of labor, okay? Which we already argued that is exactly the same, the difference between the salaries and the difference between the marginal productivities of labor. Because in this case, the employer is going to be able to identify them, right? So that's what it's doing in the slide. Okay, so now that we already have these two conditions, the only thing that we have to do is a little bit of just like reorganizing them, okay, just to get like that implication on what will be the optimal years of education, okay? So between which two values the optimal years of education will have to be in terms of cost and marginal product of labor, okay? So in reality, the only complicated other quotations part is to arrive to these two conditions, okay, of the model. Yeah? The reorganizing part, that's... Okay, so... Right, so from... Which one does it do first? I think it does from one first, the slide. So from the first one that you have in the slide, yeah, which is, let's substitute directly for the marginal productivity of labor, the salaries, which is exactly what it does in the slide. You get the conditions, so if you reorganize, the ratio between the differences between the marginal productivity of labor and cost has to be higher than the optimal levels of education, yeah? And then from the second one, you get the other condition. And again, what I'm doing is just substituting the difference between the salaries by the difference between the marginal productivities of labor. And in this case, well, it's going to be the opposite, right? So the ratio between the difference between the marginal productivities of labor over the cost for low ability has to be less than the optimal levels of education. So now we just have to put optimal level years of education in the middle, okay? And you get to that one highlighted in white that you have in the slide. So if the employer is able to perfectly identify so it will be able to perfectly identify, marginal productivity of labor if the years of education is within that two values, okay? Depending on the cost and depending on the marginal productivity of labor of the workers. Will this depend on the market? Okay, on many factors, of course it will. So if you reorganize them, that two, then you go to this equation, and that will be the theoretical model for market signaling. Now, nobody asks me if I'm going to ask you in the exam the theoretical model for market signaling, please. I will not ask you to develop the theoretical model for market signaling. You have to comprehend it, okay, understand it, but I will not ask you to develop the theoretical model. Okay, so what about now if you get, so you manage to market yourself as high ability, they employ you, they give you the high ability salary, okay, so this person, right, you got the optimal years of education there, and then you're already working. You know, when you go to a job, you have probation, you pass probation, whatever. What issues do you think you can find? Do you think then you have to keep incentivizing, it's a bit vague, but keep incentivizing the worker? Is there any incentive? So you've already marketed yourself as high ability, you already have the salary of a high ability person. Who tells me that this person is not going to say, but I got all of these, now I'm going to go and be less productive than I should? Already got the permanent job. I get a car insurance, you know. I've already marketed myself as a low risk, right? So that would be the other type of market in which this will happen. And then suddenly, I go and I do lots of risky things with the car, yeah? So from the problem of asymmetric information, we actually sorted out this with market signaling. We develop all of this, and then there is another issue arising, yeah? But that issue is called moral hazard. There's always an issue after another one, okay? So nothing ever gets sorted out. So that's the problem with consumer behavior. Okay, and moral hazard is going to be the possibility that an individual's behavior may change because of this associated event that is already proven, okay, is already signaling that person as we said, as a low-risk person or as a high-ability person. It depends on the market that we are talking about, okay? So that will depend on the situation. As it says there, well, this will not just be insurance. This could be very common in the labor market, okay? And it will alter the ability of markets to what? To allocate resources efficiently. This is a huge issue because what's the main aim of economics? To allocate resources efficiently, okay? So if anyone asks you what's the aim of economics, don't answer money, okay? It's the allocation of resources, the efficient allocation of resources. That's the aim of economics. Okay, yeah? Right, so all the time, or most of the time, when we are seeing the problem of asymmetric information, and when we are seeing the problem also of the consequences of asymmetric information and how we deal with this, we are looking at it from the point of view. So here you have, for example, the case of, this is an actual real example of a research paper of people insurance, of how they get insurance. And they actually, what happens is they start to drive more miles per hour than they have actually reported, okay, for car insurance or at the, so how moral hazard happens, right? So all the time we are looking at it from the point of consumer behavior, right? And we are assuming that this doesn't happen from the firm's point of view, right? But the truth is that on the management side of the firms, this issue of asymmetric information of whether there is going to be also a good performance of the firm is also going to be a problem, okay? And it may not be that this always happens. And this is what is known as the principal agent problem, which we may have heard before. It's more common that you have heard it if you see the supply side, okay, of macroeconomics, not the consumer side. Sorry. Right, so when you are going to be looking at the principal agent problem, so in this case, it could be a problem of asymmetric information not coming from the firm identifying either employees or, well, employees, but in the terms of labor market when you are looking for them to employ them, okay, not so when they are already working for you, okay, because in this case it will be when they are already working for you, right, or consumers, right, not on the consumer side, but it will be once an employee is already working for you, okay, so on the management side, right, so it could be then that there is a problem of principal agent problem, so how can't you keep incentivizing, right, from a management point of view, that there is a high ability production, right, for saying it on a way. Right, and here, what we are going to have to remember is two things. So from Mario's side of microeconomics, when you saw it with Mario, that's what I mean, okay, no, myself in microeconomics. First of all, remember that something that we are going to assume when I talk about this is like I'm talking about profit maximizing firms, because obviously if we talk about other types of, so you know that there are different types of firms. Not all of them will be profit maximizing, right? So if we talk about charities, their aim would not be profit maximizing, okay? It would be to increase like quantity of people that they help. Okay, so it's depending on the firm that we are talking about, their aim may be different. But obviously here we're going to talk about profit maximizing firms, and this is very relevant because otherwise the outcome would be completely different. They will still be, they could still engage in activities like social responsibility, okay, but this is a different issue. Right, so in this case then, the owner's objective is always to maximize profits, and it's going to depend a lot also in the uncertainty of the outcomes of the firm. So how can the owner keep incentivizing the managers or the workers to deliver correct outcomes? And there are going to be different strategies that owners can follow to eliminate uncertainty, okay, and that they follow. So we are just going to see a couple of them. Okay. Okay. So we know that similar to what the high ability and the low ability of the workers, also of the person who are looking for jobs, okay? Because here the difference is like these people are not looking for jobs anymore, okay? So this is not the labor market, right? These are already people who are already working in the firm. So similar to that, once a person is already working, okay, once you are a manager or like a worker, right, you could still decide to do a higher effort or a lower effort. Now, even if a person does a lower effort and a higher effort, there is still an element of uncertainty, okay, that could come into play. And this is very easy to understand. So think into about a shop. But you could make a very high effort. But if on that day nobody enters into your shop, okay, but there is an element of, bad luck there. Nobody has entered. You could be super happy that day, right? But if nobody enters, nobody's going to sell. No, you're not going to sell anything, right? So there is an element of bad luck. And maybe one day, lots of people enters, right? So there is an element of good luck also and bad luck. Okay. So what two strategies are going to see? right? One, it could be that a way of sorting out uncertainty, for example, for the owner. It could be that you could think about a SOP, but you can think about any other type of business. It is agreed, for example, a fixed payment in terms of salary, right? And this fixed payment may depend on the total revenues of a specific worker makes for that specific firm. We will see some numbers now, but that, right? So that will also, we said, it will depend on the uncertain outcomes, right? That may happen. Like, for example, the good and the bad luck that more people or less people enter, if we are talking about a SOP. Yeah? But assume like a person decides to do a low effort, and then within your owner has agreed that within the 10,000 on the 20,000, okay, of total revenue, you get a salary of 0. Let me actually go showing you here. So basically, so in this case, the worker makes a low effort. The salary here will be 0. Okay? So the first type of agreement that it could be made is an agreement of the salary depending on the total revenue. Okay? These are different types of how to solve the principal agent framework. It depends a lot on the industry. There are many types, okay, depending on the specific industry that you read about. And then it could be that depending on the effort that you make, if you do a high effort, then this agent tells you, well, if you do a high effort, you get a salary of 24,000. Okay? Right. So what could you do? You know, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. Because I know it's easy to listen to it. Right. Well, I'm not sure if it is easy, but just if you are the worker, of course, what could you do? So a small hint, which I hope you got from when we saw expected utility, something that you could start calculating is what your expected salary, right? So your expected salary, oh my goodness, I think I'm lecturing too much now. So your expected salary is 12,000. So if he does the absolute minimum effort, in a very, 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 very bad luck day, right? The minimum total revenue in terms of monetary units that this person is going to get is 10,000, call it X, but in this case it's 10,000, yeah? So in reality, the expected salary minus the cost of the minimum effort is positive, right? It's 2,000. So in principle, in terms of expectancy, we could say that he actually will decide to do a high effort, right? Because his expected salary will be, well, positive. But however, if he does 10,000, remember, right, in the minimum effort, between 10,000 and 20,000, he gets zero, okay? The manager gets all that total revenue, okay? Nothing of that total revenue goes to him. So this may not be the best arrangement from him, but we are not evaluating this, okay? We will see now a different type of arrangement. Now, from the management point of view, in terms of profits, if the worker does a high effort, so if the worker makes a high effort, which is here in A1, the expected total revenue will be 30,000, yeah? Is it 30,000? Yeah. Which is the midpoint between 40 and 20, yeah? In terms of profits, would be 18,000. Yes, so he has a expected total revenue of 30,000, and he has to pay a salary of 12,000. Yeah, the expected profit will be 30,000 minus 12,000. 18,000. Yeah? Yeah, that's what. So this is expected total revenue, and he pays the salary to the worker, assuming that he does a high effort. Okay, so this could be a type of arrangement. Another type of arrangement is to agree that your salary depends on the total revenue and so another scheme that is used in the, so this actually explains what we just explained. Another scheme could be to agree that the salary of this worker depends on the total revenue minus the profit. So that will be the general equation for this scheme without specific numbers, okay? The numbers are just an example. This is actually one that is much more used in the principal agent problem. That's a P, sorry. Profit. Yeah, sorry, yeah, that's a good point, sorry. Sorry, this is how I write profit. Sorry, I didn't realize. It's how I got used to in my degree to write profit, so I do it without thinking about it. But yeah, it's probably because some of my lecturers used to do it like that, so yes, but yeah. So that's a common actual equation following the principal agent problem. That's a salary, total revenue minus profit. Right, so in this case, the manager may think, well, so my expected profit, the way that I will calculate my expected profit is assuming that this worker is going to do a high effort, okay? Because otherwise, I don't want the worker. So we just calculated the expected profit that the person may have. So the expected profit, if it does a high effort, is 18,000. Yeah? Now, total revenue here may change. So there are going to be two options now for this salary. Right? So it will be, in this case, Okay, so if the worker decides to go high effort, we know the expected revenue is 30,000. We've just done that. So the salary will be, the expected salary will be 12,000. But what about if it's low effort? Well, now he can get a salary because now the salary actually is an arrangement. Okay, it's a different setup. Now the problem is like if it is low effort and he is calculating his profits as being at least 18,000, okay, the manager. Now see, if it is low effort, the guy could be as unlucky as having 10,000 total revenue, right? Now that would be a really bad arrangement because it gets 10,000 total revenue and the profits are 18,000. What is the worker going to do? Pay 8,000? Okay, that would be really, really bad. So at the very, very, very least, we will expect the worker to want to be on a positive salary, right? So at the very least, we will expect the worker to want this total revenue to be above 18,000. So 18,100 or 19,000 minimum. Above 18,000, okay? Otherwise, you'll not want to be low effort at all. So still in this scheme, there is a high incentive to be high effort. So basically, with the principal agent problem, any scheme that the manager chooses will go directed for the worker to be high effort. Otherwise, it would not make sense, the scheme, right? So any of these two schemes need to be directed to that. And that will be based on the data of the total revenue that the firm is having. Yeah? So these actually are two schemes that are used. Now this changes, of course, between firms and industries, okay? So it will not be the same in a shop. It will not be the same neither in the labor market, okay? And for example, if you think about, for example, the wages offer. So let's actually see graphically more generalized the labor market to see wages. And so we finalize this topic before the break, okay? So it's now just a graph. Have you seen labor market before? Much. So just when you see this graph, first, remember that supply here is workers, no consumers, okay? And sometimes it's difficult to get your hand around the labor market graphs. And demand here is firms. Right, so what's the clearing wage in this graph? The equilibrium wage is the clearing wage. The clearing wage is W star, yeah? Right, so this is real wage, and the real wage, remember, is the wage divided by the price of the product, okay? Okay, in this case, the supply of labor, which is this one, is fixed. Now, the supply of labor in the labor markets, depending on the labor market that we are talking about, it's, in many markets, sometimes could be quite inelastic, okay? This is very restrictive. And what is the problem of being so restrictive? What do you think is going to be one of the problems of being so restrictive? Now, the problem of this is like, if they fire you, then the workers know that they are going to be employed almost straight away because there is no more supply, okay? So then what's the issue? Well, you may lose the wage, but then you are going to have exactly the same wage straight away. So there may be no an incentive to be highly productive once you are employed. So what firms then can do, and this is the not shrinking constraint. So this is the efficiency wage theory. That's what it says, following the principal agent problem. Right? So imagine you are firm A, okay? What you could do then to attract your workers, to retain your workers? Well, what about, you know the clearing wage is here, but you go, and once you employ your workers, you offer this wage, which is above the clearing wage. Well, then you may go down in productivity, but if you go down in productivity, I'm going to fire you. And then you may have a straightaway job. But if you find another job, you are going to find another job for double you start, which is lower than the wage I'm paying you. So you see, so I'm incentivizing you to work hard for me because I'm offering a wage above the clearing wage of the market. Yeah? So that's called efficiency wage. And actually, in a labor market, you will expect firms to offer higher salaries than the clearing wage competing for workers. And that's really common in different labor markets. Okay, you compete for workers that way. And that kind of deals with the principal agent problem. Yeah, everyone understood what the graph is saying? Yes?
What does it mean by the wage necessary to keep workers from working? What do you mean by
The shrinking constraint is like the no, it means what I explained about the lowering productivity of the workers, basically the incentive of no. Not having that constraint in the market. We'll have a 10 minutes break right now, okay? So, and then before we start with externalities. So basically what you do with the supply then is to have it flexible, increasing the salaries, instead of fixing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just sorry, I just want
Okay. Okay, so we're going to start a new topic now, externalities. I know we are 1 hour delay in the Mario, okay, but don't worry, we'll have time to see everything. Okay, that happened also last year. It's just because sometimes when we go into theory, we get a bit delayed. But then the last lecture is already planned to be smaller, okay, for this reason. So don't worry about anything. We will have time. Okay, so we are going to see externalities. And externalities is another type of market failure, okay? So it's a bit of change of topic, it's a quite change of topic of asymmetric information, okay, and what we've seen up until now. Now, externalities also, you are going to see a lot of concepts that relate a lot to the supply side, so it lies more. We are also going to see externalities from the consumer side, but particularly a lot in the first part, I'm going to do a lot of reference to what potentially you've already seen, okay? Just a little bit to remind you, so we can then move to the consumer side, okay, on externalities. So everyone is level up, just in case you forgot, even if it is just one term. Okay, so why externalities? Okay, so come on, why externalities is a market failure? Why do you think externalities is a market failure? You've seen some externalities before, right? This is not the first time that you are seeing externalities. So first of all, can anyone tell me an example of externalities? Yeah, come on. Pollution. Why is pollution an externality?
Because it's unwanted good to a third party.
Yeah, very good, yeah. Yeah, so pollution, it's an externality on production, yeah. And it's normally a cost which affects a third party, yeah, so. Crime, yes.
Housing prices, the value of the property.
Yeah, very good. Do you had exactly the same example?
Well, like vaccine, because you don't inject vaccine, you get sick, you give it to the others.
Okay. Very good, that's a positive externality, yeah. Education is a positive externality also, right? But we just talk about education, right? So there are many which could be positive, negative, and you know that externalities can be on production or on consumption, right? So you mainly actually have seen externalities on the production side. On the film side, you've seen a little bit less on the consumer behavior side, okay? And this is more what this lecture will focus on, but we will do a reminder on the production side. Okay, so quick reminder. So the cost or benefit is generated externally to that somebody. An externality imposed benefit will be positive externality, and if an externality imposes a cost, will be a negative externality, of course. They asked me, I'm just going to say for everyone, just in case, because normally when a student has a question, 80% of you have the same. Can you use externalities for the blog post? Because obviously you saw it also with Mario. Yes, there needs to be reference to Micro 4, okay? So no everything has to be a reference to Micro 3, but yes, of course you can use externalities. Now is when everyone uses externalities for the blog post, but yeah, you can. Okay, so here you have several examples for negative externalities, several examples for positive externalities. We're not going to go through all of them. You've seen several already. Okay, so right, let me, for the moment, to put this because I'm not going to use the visualizer for a bit, finally. Right, so now the first revision that we are going to do, because everyone has to have this very clear, it's why the reason why externalities appear It becomes, first of all, because of the classification that in economics we have of goods, okay? So you know that, first of all, externalities cause Pareto inefficiencies, right? And this is one of the reasons why they mainly appear. So when they cause Pareto inefficiencies, it's because mainly what is happening is like the demand of a specific good is different to the social optimum demand of that good. Now, if it is a positive externality, then the social optimum demand will be higher. If it is a negative externality, the social optimum demand will be lower. Okay, so it depends on what we are talking about. So you have there, so too much, that's a much more better technical definition, too much scarce resources allocated to an activity which causes a negative externality, or too little resources allocated to an activity that causes a positive externality. Now, when externalities appear, then how we are going to sort out this problem? But normally, there has to be government intervention, right, to sort it out. Otherwise, the problem is like the private market. So the issue with externalities is like the private market allocation doesn't provide the social optimum. And this is when we need government intervention. And there could be different reasons. So we will actually see that even trade, when we saw, for example, the Edgeworth box, even between consumers, like, for example, smoking, right, could be an externality between consumers. Even if we have, well, we'll actually see an example when we saw in lecture 1 the Kyoto Protocol, even with government intervention, and we saw the rights to pollute, okay, we can see that's a type of externality, right? And even then, it is very difficult to actually arrive to a social optimum, okay? And in that case, because who do you give the rights to, okay? And everything actually comes from the definition of goods that we give in economics. So quick revision of this, because you should be, I mean, you could lecture on this almost already, okay? So remember that we have private goods, club goods, common resources, and public goods. So two type of characteristics that define the goods in economics, which are rivalry and excludability. Rivalry is the capacity to more than one consumer to consume the goods at the same time. Excludability is whether a good can be consumed without paying for it, okay? Private goods, a good is rival and excludable. Club goods, a good is excludable and non-rival. Common resources, a good is rival and non-excludable. And public goods is non-excludable and non-rival. And normally it's public goods, the ones which private markets are really inefficient providing them. You know, a really good to ask, because I'm not teaching Micro 2 or Micro 3, but in past years I've been. A really good discussion questions done in an exam for this is like define which type of good roads are. Because roads can be classified in the 4 categories, depending on whether there is traffic, on whether there is tolls, okay, and you have like a whole page to write on that, right? And so you were asking me before, what reasons you don't get 100%? Because there is always, but you forgot one, okay? So that's why it's a very good discussion question to ask. Okay, so, right. So what have you, I hope so, I got it right, seen so far from the production side? So I'm going to go relatively quick on this, but obviously you stop me because you've seen this, okay? So on the production side, how the firm internalizes an externality. Well, it depends on whether it is a negative, a positive externality, if it is a externality in production or in consumption. And this comes with the, for example, imagine we have a negative externality in production, right? So you've seen this before. Maybe not so many arrows, but you see it. So what happens is under perfect competition, what we are going to have is an underproduction of the good. Okay? Just listen to the story. Right, so because there is an underproduction of the good, let me actually follow the graph here, because it could be much easier. So if we go to perfect competition, which could be, so we go to perfect competition, which you have here, yeah, what we have is an underproduction of the good, yeah? So the problem is that what we have, right, is that so we have quantity of chemicals, so we have a negative externality. So in reality, the people want to produce less production of this because this is pollution, right? So in reality, what people want is that optimal production there. So what do we have to do? So there is a marginal external cost. Now, the marginal external cost, what is going to be? The marginal external cost is going to be increasing. It's going to be for every unit produced, it's going to be higher and higher and higher, okay, for the negative externalities in production. So where is this internalized? So this is going to be part for the society, okay, for the marginal social cost. This is going to be add up to the marginal private cost of the firm to create the marginal social cost. Yeah? So imagine there is government intervention. When considering the marginal social cost, this is where they will have to consider the marginal external cost to calculate the optimum. Now, you know already that there could be, if we were producing at the perfect competition, then there could be a dead weight loss. So in other words, we gain social surplus when we produce at the social optimum. Okay? So the whole idea changes slightly if we consider a positive externality in production. You saw this on the supply side of microeconomics. So in this case, if we have positive externality in production, in reality, for example, planting quantity of trees, okay, you have this in the slides, no need to take pictures. Okay, so here, for example, what will happen is the opposite. That I re-uploaded the slides this morning. Okay, so if you go to Blackboard and you download the slides, this is now in the slides. It was not yesterday, but it's now in the slides, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so because I was not going to include it, but then I thought it was a nice revision for you to have. Okay. Okay, so then in this case, and also you have an example now in Blackboard with an additional case study in which this is used, okay, for vaccines. So you have 2 case studies this week. Okay, so with graphical analysis also. Okay, so in this case, the optimum, right, a production would be above, okay, the production that the private market produces. So in reality, society wants more trees planted, yeah, that the private market is planting, yeah? So now there is a marginal external benefit from the production of this good, yeah? Now, contrary, on the similar line to the marginal external cost, so remember the marginal external cost was increasing. It increases with every unit produced. In this case, the marginal external benefit is decreasing with every unit produced. So you get a lot of benefit from the first tree planted, okay? And this benefit increases at a decreasing rate for every tree planted, okay? So now, how does it work then? Because it's decreasing, it will also be added to the marginal social cost, but it will be extracted for the marginal social cost. Because it's the benefit. Yeah? And now, to work out the social optimum, it will be here. Now, we will also have a deadweight loss if we produced in the perfect competition, and the deadweight loss will come from this underproduction of producing in the private market instead of at the optimal. Okay? So that's actually the justification for for government intervention, yeah, for this deadweight loss. This could be, in the case of pollution, will be taxes, for example. Okay, a regulation. In this case, they are not going to tax the quantity of trees planted. Will be subsidies. Okay. Now we've seen them in production. Now in consumption. Yeah. So, now because we've already seen them in production, this could be, again, this is kind of a revision, okay? So, we will start with the new stuff now, don't worry. So, in consumption now, instead of to the actual supply side, will affect to the demand, okay? Then we will add it to the demand to see actually the effects that the externalities in consumption are having. So what about the negative externality in consumption? So what could be, for example, a negative externality in consumption? It says that a quantity of alcohol is probably not the best example, is it? But for example, smoking, right, could be a negative externality in consumption. Quantity of alcohol could be like if you think about long-term effects on your health and then affecting, for example, the NHS. Well, here, I mean, you could argue so many things in externalities. Right, so in here, again, because it's a negative externality in consumption, what you have is a marginal external cost, okay? So the idea of the marginal external cost and the marginal external benefit is going to be exactly the same, okay, than for the externalities in production. Now, the difference is going to be that instead of adding them to the supply, now what we are doing it is to taking them into account in the marginal private benefit, in the demand. Okay? So in this case, which is the marginal external cost, will be extracted from the marginal private benefit. So the social optimum, what people will want, is that the consumption of this good is less than what the private market is actually consuming. So any policy, so actually there is a deadweight loss from the overconsumption of this good. So any policy should be actually directed to reduce the consumption of this good. What do you think they do? They tax the consumption of alcohol, yeah? We know that because we pay out tax now. So, yeah. Sugar, another one, yeah? Okay, so now there is a pattern on this, so we could already do almost this graph without looking at it. Now, marginal external benefit, now for the positive externality of consumption. Why quantity of rail miles? This is consumption of public transport. Okay, so this could be good, for example, for the environment, right? So similar reason for pollution, but instead of a negative one, it could be here like a positive externality in consumption. The most public transport we consume, the less we contaminate, good for the environment. Okay, so in this case, marginal external benefit, it will be add up to the marginal private benefit, okay, because the demand here is a marginal private benefit. Now, in reality, the optimum consumption would be above what the private market is consuming, okay? So there is a deadweight loss from the underconsumption generated from the private market. So any policy should be directed then to increasing the consumption of this good. Right. Okay, so this is from the part of the supply side and how externalities, right, will become. So it's kind of a revision of what you've seen about externalities so far. Now, how externalities are going to relate to consumer behavior. And that's what we go with microphone. Yeah. Okay, so now we are going to come back a little bit to the idea that we saw in the Edgeworth box, okay? Because I know you love the Edgeworth box. Okay, so we're going to consider two agents and two goods, right? And we're going to with smoke. Smoke is a very typical example of externalities. And the other good is money. Now, here there's going to be a trick. And then for one of the agents, agent 1, both goods are good goods. And for the other agent, money is a good, but smoke is a bad. Now, here, the thing is, before we move to the Edgeworth box, in difference curves, what does it mean that a good is a bad? So if a good is a good, then when I increase the consumption of a good, my utility increases. And as a consumer, you want to maximize utility. If a good is a bad, the consumption of that good creates this utility. And some goods create this utility, right? So here, consumer agent B is that person that doesn't want to smoke in the room, okay? So agent B, everyone knows what the difference curve for agent B will look like because we've done this so many times now in micro. Right, so if we go for agent B, agent A, sorry, and we have, what should we put? Y smoke here, and X money here. So remember that for A, both goods are good goods, okay? Nothing is a bad here, so everything is a good. So these are just normal indifference curves. Well, normal. I mean, everything is normal here, but like indifference curves, the ones that we are usually we normally see. So basically, so we know that the marginal rate of substitution, okay, so we want to consume the more that we can, but obviously, like to increase the consumption of one of the goods, we need to decrease the consumption of the other good. Okay, so this is the properties of the indifference curves, right? Marginal rate of substitution, so they are decreasing, they are concave, they are, they are convex, the farther from the origin they prefer, and so on. You know the properties, we don't need to do them here. Right. Now, the thing here is not agent A. That we got him. The problem here is this agent B. And for agent B, money is a good. So again, so money is the good. But smoke is a bad. So how his indifference curves will look like? His indifference curves will look something like this. So in this case, the marginal utility of consuming X is positive. So he increases utility from consuming good X because he's a good, yeah? But the marginal utility of consuming good Y is negative. So he has this utility that we call, yeah, from consuming good Y. However, the consumption of this good is going to be involuntary, right? So he's going to consume smoke involuntarily all the time. Well, no, all the time, no. But for example, pollution. You actually go to the street and you consume pollution all the time. It's involuntarily, but that creates you this utility. Potentially, I'm assuming this, but yeah, I assume. I hope it's a good assumption, I don't know. Okay, so it does a bad good for you. So actually, your indifference curves will look type of like that with pollution. So in this case, why they will look like that? So see that here, for example, we said, well, an increase. So if you increase the consumption of to increase the consumption of one of the goods, you will have to decrease the consumption of the other good. This is the properties of the indifference curves, right? Of the indifference curves, yeah? Marginal rate of substitution, right? Decreasing. A slope, right? So in this case, to increase the consumption, so within the same indifference curve, see what happens. You actually know, so see the difference. So you are increasing from agent B, the marginal rate of substitution. You increase the consumption of one good and you have to decrease the consumption of the other good to keep in the same level of utility. But for agent B, you keep in the same level of utility, actually increasing the consumption of both goods. Right? Because one of the goods is creating this utility. So you actually, first of all, the consumption of smoke is involuntary. But second of all, because it's creating this utility, to keep in the same level of utility, you do actually have to consume more of the one that gives you utility, otherwise you reduce utility, basically. Also, another property, the farther from the origin, the more preferred. But here they don't really go farther from the origin, okay? If you could argue, they go closer to the origin. By the way, something that I'm doing is to place randomly good Y as the bad good, yeah? What about if I decided to play X as the bad one? How would the indifference curves will look like? So, just so you have it, just in case. Again, not saying that I'm asking this, okay? This is just in case. Just in case you were wondering. So if this was the bad good, and this was the good good, okay, then you'll reverse them. Yeah, it'll look like this. So basically, the reverse ones. Yeah. So you need to be very careful if, for example, in this case, if you are not doing the traditional ones, that you need to be very careful also if you do the traditional ones, but because you are very used to do the traditional ones, you are very mechanic doing that. But in this case, if you have a bad good and a good one, you need to be very careful where you place them to do the shape of the indifference curves. Okay. All right, so Right. Okay, so let's go then to the kind of Edgeworth box with a trick here, okay? So it's kind of the idea of the Edgeworth box. Okay, first of all, see that the Edgeworth box is slightly different to what you saw, right? Because see that now smoke is on the vertical axis, that good X, which was the good, it is in the horizontal axis. But see that for agent A, for both goods were good, the smoke will go from 0 to 1. So a smoke is a dichotomic variable that takes values 0 and 1, okay? Or a categorical variable, not sure how you normally call it, yeah, but takes values from 0 and 1. But see that, for example, for agent B, right, 1B, the maximum, a smoke goes in its origin 1 to 0. That's the trick of this Edgeworth box, okay? So it's a little bit different. That's the only reason why it's been like that is so the indifference curves can be tangent, okay? So it's been a bit trick, the Edgeworth box. We switched the origins because of that fact that it is a bad good. Right, so now the problem to find an efficient allocation here, and here we are going to link with the concept of Coase theorem, okay? So just because it's probably my pronunciation, which you have in the slides anyway, okay? Now, so as we saw in the Edgeworth box, there may be possible, probably many efficient allocations here. Now, the issue is that one agent will want an allocation of 0 smoke. The other agent potentially will want an allocation which is the closest to 1 as possible. Okay? Now, we could actually think about potentially a budget constraint in this case and allocate relative prices. Now, the allocation of relative prices could be done thinking about, and then we can relate this to lecture 1, about what about if we assign rights to pollute to one of the agents? But then the question is like, who is going to get the rights to pollute? Because if agent A, who really likes smoke, well, who thinks smoke is a good, so we assume that he will want smoke to be near the top of the maximum allocation, get the rights to pollute, probably then he will want a maximum allocation or an optimal allocation towards the top of the box. Yeah? And if we give the rights to pollute to agent B, who actually thinks, who for this person, good X is a bad good, then we'll want an allocation closer to the origin, or closer to the where smoke is 0. Now, one of the agents is going to be much worse off, okay? So in terms of a social optimum, right, we are not going to arrive to a Pareto optimum or efficient in terms of socially optimum allocation. And Coase argues that when we have an externality in the sense that when one of the goods is considered bad for one or more agents, then we cannot arrive to an efficient allocation without intervention from an external agent. And this would be our government. Yeah? So that's in simple terms. And actually, you saw this a little bit with the Kyoto Protocol, what happened with this market system that generated, and that's supposed to be government, okay? That's with the rights to pollute that it was created, no? That they will act in their own interest, these two agents. No? So depending on who has the right to pollute, will go one way or the other, but it will not arrive to the social optimum in which one of the agents will always have their own way. Okay, so the way that we are going to see then Coase theorem is how can we then internalize, right, this externality. Where are we? Okay, see, yes, here. So the whole idea then, so what we are going to see is that how then we can internalize or externalize, okay, so internalize our externalities, yeah? So we are going to see that actually, so we've done a revision of externalities, what you saw from the firm side, and we explained externalities from the consumer point of view, okay, and how allocation was not going to be either efficient. So Coase theorem, we are going to see it bringing everyone, okay, so both sides together, the affected, the firm, and also the affected part. Okay, so how are we doing with time? Okay. So what he's going to argue is that the efficient level of the externality is going to be produced no matter which agent is going to be assigned the property right, with one condition. With the condition that the preferences are going to be quasi-linear. You know quasi-linear equations, yeah? And that's one of the issues, for example, for consumer preferences, okay? That's not actually common when we have quasi-linear ones, right? Okay, so we do have quasi-linear, for example, in firms. That's more common then. Okay, right. So, for example, so take, well, no, actually, this is just theory, but so we take a firm, and a firm will produce, so we are going to see it with pollution. Pollution is the most clear example of a negative externality. So if you take a firm which produces a negative externality, the negative externality can be considered like a production also, okay? So it produces one good, call it good X, right? And because of the production of that good, it will produce like a collateral damage, which is the externality, right? So that's part of each production. In this case, it is a firm. Now, that firm, that collateral production, it affects another nearby firm. And that will also affect its production, okay? And that, for example, fishery, because the pollution will affect the water, right? It will affect its production, and it will become as something given for them, but it will be not something that they are producing, okay? Same if you think from a consumer point of view, with the smoke, right? It's something that it will become given for you, but it will be not something that is actually part of, it's like involuntarily, okay, for agent B. So we were saying for this utility, you had to keep increasing the consumption of this good, right, to increase your utility, because it's something that you comes given to your consumption. You didn't ask for it, it just happens to be. Right, so if we assume perfect competition, just to simplify, okay, and then there are price takers on the consumers also in the price that they set. So we have here then two firms, S and F, right? So for the first firm, which is steel, this is the price. And for the second firm, which is the fishery, that's the price. So now it will be a double problem now, okay, to arrive to a potential solution. Always, assuming perfect competition or not, the aim is always to maximize profits, okay? So the difference here is like, depending on the environment in which we are working now, so if we are assuming perfect competition, it's like the price are given, but it's still the aim to maximize profits, okay? Okay, so assuming that both of them have a cost, okay, so the profits for the first firm, which is the steel, will depend on its production in terms of steel that they produced, and then the units of pollution. So pollution is type of, it comes into its profit like a good, okay, that they produce. It is not going to be a bad good for them. It's not actually affecting them, okay? In fact, it's a good for them. It's like agent A, right? It's kind of a good for them. It's a bad good for the fishery. And then we will have, obviously, the total revenue and the total cost, which will depend on the units produced of both goods. Now, if there is no any external cost of the production cost, then that will be the profit function. And by then I mean it could be that there is, imagine that there is a tax attached by the level of production, or sorry, the level of pollution, okay? And then there would be an extra cost of pollution. But at the minute, there is no intervention, right? And it could be intervention, because there would not be a social optimum yet. Now, what then is going to be the, so I'll set up this problem and then we'll go, okay? So just commenting. Right, so what would be the firm's problem here? So it will have to maximize profits. And if you remember how to maximize profits, you just go to the first order conditions. So as it is a perfect competition firm, it will equal the marginal cost to the price. And then we will have the marginal cost of pollution equal to 0. Now, I will do the workouts and I will continue explaining the theorem next week because we have 1 minute to go, okay? So we will finish with the cost theorem and we will link it to consumption next week. And we'll also start with behavioral economics next week.
Jan, long day.
This is yours or mine?
Yeah, that's mine.
Okay. I was just checking that all the same.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Imagine everyone. You know what? When was it? Last week or 2 weeks ago was my peer review, and I forgot my login details. I don't know if it was the stress, and I had to just really visualize them. And I couldn't believe it.
So how did you remember all the slides and
Well,
stuff?
it was